Today's guests are podcasters Todd Cochrane and Ryan Ozawa and radio veteran KIMO Akane. Today's show is focused on podcasting and its growth and effect on terrestrial radio.
The listenership on people that listen to podcasts are not going to put up with traditional radio in a 60-minute show. You'll have 40 minutes of content and 20 minutes of commercials. In podcasting, the listenership is not going to put up with that. So even though I do nearly a 45-minute show, the most advertising I can put in my show is about 3 minutes without getting pushback from my listeners.
Okay. KIMO, comments. Let's have some.
Well,
what do you think from the radio side?
4812 or
4812.
Something like that. And then,
What does radio think about podcasting? Because you've been in radio for how long?
Oh, that's a personal question.
Because you look so young.
A long time, ever since my great grandfather Marconi invented the radio. What does radio think about podcasting? I don't think that we really think of it one way or the other. I mean, it's just another medium. Podcasting, iPods are kind of like, in the beginning we had reel-to-reel recorders, and then those went by the wayside when we had cassette players. iPods are almost kind of a similar thing. The actual podcasting event itself, though, is a little bit different because it takes the one strength that radio has, which is the ability to be personal, and combines it with the broadcasting element. So as radio is going through and becoming less and less personal, you have everyone and their mother and their son creating their own broadcasts and calling it podcasts. To me, the problem is podcasts are going to be like what happened with the Internet. Everybody had a website. And after you looked at the first 100, you kind of went, okay, I don't really want to go look at these guys anymore because it's just some idiot with nothing to say, right?
And there is a high level of podcasts that are out there. They're not that great, but there are, on the other hand, there are some that are coming to their own.
And those ones are a little bit more voyeuristic, though. You hear the one in the bathtub or, well, I didn't hear that, but, someone else told me about it.
Right.
It's just, it's almost like voyeuristic, even though the audio quality sucks and it's kind of weird.
It's because, and part of it is, too, is because there's no FCC regulations. Podcasters can say what they want to say. You're going to have explicit content that's going to be readily available, and it's, listener beware. That's for, including parents who've got kids that are downloading stuff on the, surfing the Internet's the same thing as downloading stuff. You got to watch what they're downloading now, too.
Yeah, so if they're listening to iPod and just has a big smile on their face, maybe take an earplug and put it in your ear.
There's certainly a voyeuristic and from the podcaster side, an exhibitionist side to it, which has a very limited appeal. My show is more on the personal side, and frankly, only if you're willing to put up with my quirks and my occasional babbles about my family will you listen. And certainly that format would not work on a terrestrial radio station, and I think the earlier comparisons to blogs continue to be really good because you get the same thing. You have a lot of blogs where there was this cute guy at Oceans and yada yada yada, and after a while that'll grate on you. But every so often, 1 out of 100 will be really remarkable. Someone who turns out to have a great voice, a great insight into the way things are in a specific topic. And I think the other strength, too, is you can be really niche-oriented with a podcast. If you're really interested in a specific kind of rare mollusk in the South Pacific, you're not going to have a rare mollusk show on KKEA, but you can do a podcast about that. And every single...
Really?
You could if you pay. No.
That's true. But you...
Inside joke.
Sponsor it yourself.
But you can do a podcast focused really tightly, and you might not have 10,000 listeners, and only 100 listeners, but every one of those listeners would be intensely interested in that very narrow topic.
But that's exactly the difference between podcasting and radio. Like you said, podcasting can be incredibly niche, whereas radio, by its definition, is mass appeal.
How's radio going to adopt this then?
I think they already are. You see radio stations nationwide that are rolling out, repackaged content. Unfortunately, because of some of the copyright laws that haven't changed yet for podcasters, they're actually having to replace music that they're playing in their podcast with, non-RI controlled content. But my take on that is, and Kimo's probably going to reach over here and slap me, is that people are kind of fed up with maybe the established media bins, being that a lot of traditional radio that is out there today is controlled by people in New York who's setting the content playlists. Now, that may not be true here in Hawaii, but I know that it is.
It's Big Brother. Corporations are coming together.
So, I think I miss the DJs actually having control of what's being put on their boards. I think that,
But that didn't happen in your lifetime.
Well, I don't know about that.
It wasn't.
Todd's as old as you, man.
No, but I think the power got taken away from the disc jockeys as far as what songs to pick back in the 50s. It went to the program directors because you found that disc jockeys were playing whatever people paid them to play. So,
right.
That got taken away.
What's wrong with that?
Nothing, because then you just paid the program directors to play what they got paid to play.
But that's still a contemporary problem. There was just that lawsuit recently in New York about payola still going around in this day and age under different names with different job descriptions on the people's business cards, but it was the same scam.
Yeah. It exists today. It's just a matter of how they arrange it. Couple of, as a aside, couple of ways that they got around it was they gave the money to the radio station as a budget. The big thing about payola is that it's controlled. You give control of the airwaves to somebody else in exchange for money. And a lot of radio stations, what happens is the independent promoters, the guys who got paid to play the records, they got paid on every record. So they didn't care what you played. So they told the radio station, all you have to do is tell me before you tell the trades and the record company what songs you're going to play so I can get paid, and then I'll give you your share. So they didn't really give up control, but, it is, quote-unquote, probably not a kosher thing to do. But anyway, as far as the disc jockeys playing with the records, which is how we started this, it wasn't since maybe the late 50s that the disc jockeys had that ability. Yeah. And the only reason it got taken away from them, really, is because as radio had competition with television and other things, we had to find a way to make the radio stations appeal better to the masses, because that's the one thing we can't do is we can't appeal to individuals. We have to appeal to masses.
I think you really touched on it earlier when you said that's the big difference, and radio has to have mass appeal, and that goes back to the big basis of our conversation, which is having commercials and making money, because radio has to make money. The people who work here have to earn a living. I'm one of those hippie little podcasters sitting in my den talking into a microphone every week, but I could take it or leave it. People aren't expecting anything besides what I put out. There's no responsibility put on my shoulders. So, of course, it's easy. But if you have to run a station, pay for FCC licenses, run a tower, have a studio, have all of this fantastic equipment.
Pay me.
Pay KIMO. And you don't pay KIMO enough, really. But
thank you. I agree.
Clearly there's a survival element. So it's not, I don't believe that advertising and commercialism is evil because people have to make a living.
And also, radio being mass appeal, how many people, are listening to podcasting?
How many are listening? Well,
yeah, en masse.
I think we're at the very beginning of an upswell. I've seen some reports that are out that 6 million people maybe. I think that
what happened to the one that said 30 million?
I think
those ones in the paper?
I think that was a little aggressive in their counting, but it's going to take some time. It's a new media, but I think because you have mobile phones that have got storage on them now. You've got whatever media player it is, being an iPod, iRiver, doesn't matter. Everyone's got a headset plugged into their ears. When people realize that they can start filling their brain with, not necessarily top 40, but maybe tech, science, whatever the topic may appeal to them, get their daily fix of that type of content. And I'm not going to say that terrestrial radio is not going away. That's not make any bones about that. It's not going anywhere.
At least not on this show, right?
Absolutely not. But I think what you'll see is you see niche programs that will do very well, and people attached to Ryan's. Ryan has an audience of people that follow him, and they follow him just the same reason they follow KIMO, is that they follow him. They tune into his show.
Yeah, we like to hear Ryan in the bathtub.
I've never done a bathtub.
No. Well, the thing about that you touched on is real important, is you're talking about targeted content. Because as an advertiser, you don't want everyone under the sun. If you sell sub-zero refrigerators, you are going after a specific demographic. And if you can get into that specific demographic through a means such as podcasting that has an audience that is willing to listen to it, has a relationship with the person doing the podcast, it's much more powerful than throwing an ad in the newspaper, let's say, and just paying that and hoping. You can measure it, you can monitor it, and you can track it.
And you can negotiate very substantial higher ad placement rates than you would on traditional radio because you are targeting that ad. Now, the same, radio stations, when they run an ad, they have to deliver a return on investment for that advertiser.
How do they do that, though? Do you track that? Can you track that, Kimo?
Yeah, basically what happens is your business either goes up or it doesn't. If it doesn't go up, you stop using it. That's the big difference between advertising on the internet and advertising on traditional mass media. The internet is more permission-based or targeted marketing, whereas mass media, newspapers, television, radio, you can only target it so defined. You can buy a certain television show, you pretty much know the kind of people that watch that. You can buy a certain radio station because you pretty much know the kind of people who listen to that. But when you're advertising a car on the radio, not everybody who's listening to the radio is in the market to buy a car. But when you want to do the same thing on the internet or in podcasts, you can certainly, if George Nita decides that he wants to do a podcast, you pretty much know that people who are listening to him are into cars. So you're going to sell a lot of car stuff.
And there's certainly a place for that, for the broad approach, what they call the shotgun approach. I mean, Sears would not advertise in a podcast, but because they want the biggest number of ears as possible. They want the entire community of Honolulu coming down to Sears.
But maybe they go on Adam Curry's podcast. What do you think?
Well, I mean, I think that
that's a lot of ears.
True, but if you think like an advertiser, you want to know who you're reaching. And there are some places where you just say to yourself, I want to reach everyone. The more ears, the better. And then there are times where you'll say, I'm looking for the, I don't know, slightly older than they think they are MTV fan who listens to Adam Curry tech crowd. Then you'd go after Adam Curry.
Or if you're talking about like blanket branding as opposed to, typical call to action type marketing.
The approach I've taken is that my listeners are tuning in to listen to my show. If I'm going to give them a 30-second ad spot to listen to, it's got to be a product that's giving them value back. So if I can save my listeners money every time that they listen to my show, or they can put money back in their pocket if they need that particular product, that's the goal. That's what I went after. And I'm sure that's the goal of any advertisers, to get that person in to buy a product. But if I can give added value, that's the key, and we try to spice it up a little bit and change up the promotions, and we've been able to track it too, because I give my promo codes out only within the podcast itself. They're not allowed to be put on the website, so the company knows precisely what type of traffic I'm driving to them. And to believe it or not, the companies I've been involved with so far are absolutely blown away, because we are able to dial in so close on a demographic. Now, people are kind of saying, well, you guys are kind of getting big brothery too, because you're able to really know how to market to us. Well, marketing's here to stay. It's part of our life. It's not going away.
Well, I put it to you this way, and again, we were talking about payola, and everybody's all, heck, Wired Magazine's March 2005 issue was the end of radio. They really went off the deep end there. Everyone's excited because of the citizen media concept, the fact that we can't trust, with the Jason Blairs out there, with the Gannett, publishers out there, we need to take the media back and generate ourselves. But if we fall, the revolution, supposedly, in quote marks. But if we fall into the exact same traps, if we end up doing funny business and, okay, I'll talk about your Senseo coffee machine if you, whatever, then, are you really making things any better? Are you, in fact, selling an audience a pure and totally natural American, vision, when in fact you're doing something else?
That's why I love Ryan. He's a purist.
And
purist in the purest of forms.
And Ryan's going to laugh. Podcasters are crossing lines already. I call terrestrial people that are coming into I call terrestrial people that are coming into podcasting jump overs, but they haven't come up with a term for podcasters that are sliding into terrestrial.
Basically, podcasting, depending on the show, your listener is going to listen and choose what they want to hear. So you could have a podcasting show that focuses on advertising, and there's just a lot of advertising. If people are interested in that, they'll download it and listen to it. If they're interested in technology, education, or just hearing about somebody expressing themselves on a soapbox, that gives you the ability to do that as well. A lot of people are finding a new platform to talk about politics, talk about business, finance, you name it. There's a topic out there. If you are into a certain specific segment that this is what you really like to listen to, you'll find the content. It may not be good, but then again, some of it may be very good.
I do want to draw Kimo into this conversation more, though, because I think a lot about where radio is required, where you need radio. In fact, where you need NBC and ABC, and some of the downsides that sociologists are starting to get worried about when you get into the niching of media. before, when you had 4 networks and 4 television stations to listen to, or a set number of radio stations, in a way you kind of had a shared cultural experience where whether or not you like American Idol, you knew that you could have a conversation with your coworkers about American Idol. You're all watching the same thing at some level. With radio, you know, when everyone's listening to a morning radio show and they pull some prank, that's something a lot of people can talk about because a lot of people are sharing in that community experience that's created by radio. And sociologists have already published papers about what's happening to our youth when they're walking around with iPods, and they're all creating bubbles of content that only they like, but it limits, in a way, how much they can interact with another person to some extent because they're no longer being able to have some baseline of cultural, experience to converse about.
Mm-hmm. Well, a couple of things. First of all, the Wired thing that you brought up, that, to me, is written by a bunch of people who are paranoid about big corporations running things, but everything is run by a big corporation with the exception of maybe KKA, which is a big little corporation. But you know what I mean, right? There's a lot of that corporate paranoia that goes around. Yeah. But the worst thing about it is the guy who writes for Wired works for a bigger corporation than most radio stations with the exception of Clear Channel. So, the thing that they don't understand is what commercial radio does is it's a mass appeal business. It was never intended to be a personal medium. Never. But because radio people use it personally, people cross the wire and get confused. That's the thing about podcasting is it's exactly the opposite way around. It's a very personal thing that people can choose or not choose to be a part of. Like we were saying earlier about the internet, how, when it first started, you had everybody having a web page. And then now it's kind of gotten down to, you're not going to look at Joe Blow's web page because he happens to put something up there. You're going to go cruise for stuff that you're interested in. And I don't know about you, but I go to pretty much the same places almost every week with an occasional weird thing that a friend might send me.
We won't ask about that.
Drunken pictures or something like that, But aside from that, you're pretty much going to the same places every day. You're looking at the same trade magazines or whatever it is. But as far as where radio is going to go, they keep talking about how radio is dying and radio is dead. Radio, the thing about it is its simplicity. You turn it on, it's there. You turn the dial if you don't like what you're hearing to go hear something else, or you push the other button. Now, with podcasting, you got to spend a whole lot of time finding something that you want. It's the same as making a mixtape. You have to go through all these songs. I want to play this song. I want to do this. I want to do that. By the time you're done, it's like, I don't think I want to listen to what I just made. It's too much effort. Most people aren't willing to put that much effort into things once they've developed the life. Not that, those of us in this room don't have a life. Some of us do and some of us don't. And okay, I don't. But, what I'm saying is most people are busy. They got stuff that they want to do. And creating content is not something that they want to do. So the podcasting thing, we'll see it go up and there'll be a whole bunch of people doing things. And then it'll go back down to where, the quality guys will be doing things because people are buying into it. People are listening to it, supporting the advertisers, doing everything else.
We're already seeing
Did I answer your question? I'm not sure I got quite that far.
No, I'm just saying that, radio is controlled the way it is because it is considered an asset of the public and a very important one.
Isn't the amazing thing, too, that podcasting is kind of therapeutic, too. I talked about it in my journal I have online. And I swear, if I'm having a bad day and then I just I talk about whatever or have a good day, at the end of the day, I feel so much better. Save money on therapy.
I know we're almost out of time, but one thing that you did remind me of is another thing that radio has that we need is more training. Anybody can do it, which is the good thing. Anybody can do it, which is the bad thing. And a lot of people in the blogging world learned the hard way about libel, copyright law, and lawsuits and divorces. And I guarantee you that, there's already been a podcaster fired for his podcast for messing around in his church, offended his boss, he got canned. And a lot of people who do this now from home are not getting the same media training that experts like KIMO are getting, so they don't know what lines not to cross.
Well, like you said, we're almost out of time. But for people that are interested in learning how to do podcasting, Todd, can you tell us how we can find out more information about that?
Do a shameless plug here. Go to Amazon.com/podcasting. I think it's on sale now at $13.65. Good old Amazon for discounting stuff, but you can find it over there.
We'll have a link at our site. You can come over there and click through, please.
And you do seminars once in a while or workshops that we've been to?
That was I think that was pretty much a one-time event, but I can do on a demand basis. I can do seminars.
Okay. And then we'd be interested to hear about your podcast, Ryan. Where can we find that?
Well, my show is HawaiiUp.com, which is just Hawaii with UP added to the end. And also, I'm with the Hawaii Association of Podcasters, and you asked about where people can learn about it. Definitely come to our site. All of our members do presentations for different groups around town, and we'd love to invite you to come and learn about it. So at HawaiiPodcasting.com, you can find out what's coming up.
We'll have links for that, too.
And Kimo, I know that you are on the radio terrestrial side, but do you think you're going to be doing some podcasting yourself?
Yeah, actually, we're rebuilding my website, and we're loading all the prior shows that we've done up on, I think it's iPod. iTunes has the
directory.
The directory.
These are the guys to ask. What's the web address?
KimosVegas.com.
We'll have a link to that, too. Thank you, Todd, Ryan, and Kimo, for joining us today on Greater Good Radio Hawaii. This was an interesting show, and we hope that you'll join us again in the future. For you listeners out there, please join us in the after show portion where these guys talk much more about podcasting, its effect on business, and how you can do your own podcast. If you're interested in more insights on the business side of podcasting and the inside story of successful entrepreneurs, please go to greatergoodradio.com and listen to the after shows.
Please stay tuned to Sports Radio 1420 for another intriguing episode of Greater Good Radio Hawaii.